Good morning, everyone. My name is Tony Penny, and I'm the director of the Walter and Lenore Annenberg Presidential Learning Center here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. And I ask that in honor of our men and women in uniform, that you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Before we begin our program today, I wanted to recognize just a few of our special guests who are joining us in the audience. From the Simi Valley Unified School District Board of Trustees, Mr. Bill Daniels, thank you for joining us today. Also from the Simi Valley Unified School District, the Director of Secondary Education, Ms. Deborah Salgado, thank you. From our senior leadership team here at the Foundation, we have our Chief Marketing Officer, Ms. Melissa Giller, who's here. Thank you for coming. As well as our Chief Administrative Officer and President Reagan's former Chief of Staff, Ms. Joanne Drake. Also special guests who are joining us, the family members of our speaker today, Ms. Esther Popik and his daughter Anita and granddaughter Alexa. Thank you for coming today. And because of the occasion, I also wanted to take just a moment to recognize or give the opportunity for anyone who is a relative or a descendant of either a survivor or a victim of the Holocaust. So if you are a relative or of a victim or a survivor of the Holocaust, please stand. I'd like to honor you on this day as well. So today, January 27th, marks the 71st anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp and has come to be observed as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Today, we join others around the world to honor the memory of the victims of the Holocaust and to educate so that the world will never again lose so many innocents to genocide. In 1988, President Reagan spoke at the laying of the cornerstone for what is now the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. And I hope you won't mind if I share his words from that occasion with you today, because they provide an eloquent context for our speaker today. President Reagan said, "We gather here today for a solemn, profound, saddening, and yet triumphant occasion. It's an occasion that commemorates all we've lost, the irreplaceable humanity whose monstrous end will ever testify to the hellish depths of human evil. But it's an occasion that commemorates something else as well. It commemorates the seriousness of our intention as human beings, as Americans, and in the case of many of those here today, as Jews, to keep the memory of the 6 million fresh and enduring. We who did not go their way owe them this. We must make sure their deaths have posthumous meaning. We must make sure that from now until the end of days, all humankind stares this evil in the face, and that all humankind knows what this evil looks like and how it came to be. And when we truly know it for what it was, then and only then can we be sure that it will never come again." He continued, "Some people say evil of this degree is incomprehensible. They say we will never understand it. But I believe the Holocaust is comprehensible. Indeed, we must comprehend it. We have no choice. The future of mankind depends on it." Our stage today is set with 6 candles to signify our duty to honor the memory of the 6 million lost. And the roses, blooming from stems of barbed wire, remind us of our obligation to confront the evils of the Holocaust truthfully, to ensure that they are never again allowed to thrive, that ultimately freedom and good must flourish through our understanding of what happened. Our speaker today, by virtue of sharing his story with all of us, does much to ensure that this generation will comprehend that evil. And we are so grateful to you for your willingness to share your story with us today. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Mr. Michael Miki Popik.
Good morning. It's a great honor for me to be here in this beautiful place, Ronald Reagan Library, to commemorate the Holocaust Day. Thank you very much for inviting me. I was born in Czechoslovakia, a small, beautiful country, democratic country, freedom of religion, and life was beautiful. I'm also one of the youngest survivors from 2 death camps, Auschwitz in Poland and Mauthausen in Austria, Germany. I'm going to have to take you back some years, many years, when our disaster started. And the year was 1938. And I was almost 7 years old, so now you know how old I am. Some disturbing news came from Germany that the Nazis were killing Jews and destroying Jewish properties. So of course it was very disturbing living in such a beautiful country, Czechoslovakia. Because the crazy and sick dictator of Nazi Germany was menacing with war, the Czechoslovakian army was mobilizing. My father was a sergeant in the army, and when they dressed up in their uniforms, we were so proud of them. But when they left, we were crying, because you don't want to be without a father in uncertain times. So they left, and it was very miserable. Then, just about five and a half months later, the British and the Germans, they made the stupidest agreement of the Second World War, the infamous Munich Agreement, and my beautiful country was partitioned. Of course, the Germans, they fooled the British. One part of Czechoslovakia, almost the Czech Republic now, was given to the Germans, and the other part of Slovakia, where I was living, was given on silver platter to the Hungarians. It's unbelievable that 2 idiots decide it's before the war. What's going to happen to a country of 11 million people? So overnight we became Hungarians. When the Hungarian army marched into my hometown, they introduced themselves anti-Semites. The army was marching, and they were singing anti-Jewish songs. The most insulting thing that anybody can imagine. Not just to a boy of 8 years old, but to anyone. We never heard. We were living in such a beautiful, democratic country. Everybody was equal citizen, and here, now the occupying country are singing anti-Jewish songs. It was terrible, but this was the reality. Then, of course, a few months later, exactly September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and the Second World War started. And a few weeks later, school started. So we had to learn a different language, Hungarian language, but we had to listen mostly to anti-Semitic teachers. Most of the Hungarian teachers, not all of them, but most of them were anti-Semitic bastards. So what happened to the good Jewish students, as they usually were, and I wasn't included between them, we became the worst students. When an anti-Semitic teacher had classes, we Jewish kids took off, disappeared, and we went to play soccer. So we became good soccer players. But this was the reality. Occupation stinks. War is bad for everybody. Everybody suffered. But we suffered tenfold just because we were Jews. 1941, Hitler invaded Russia with the help of the Hungarians. And this was the first time he found out that the country that we are living in are allies of Germany. We didn't know. We didn't know. We know that the Hungarians are anti-Semites, but we didn't know that they are allies of Germany. The problem was that there were over 100,000 Jewish soldiers in the Hungarian army, including 3 high-ranking generals. Half of them were sent to the Russian front to fight the Russians. Now, can you believe it? The Jewish soldiers had to fight their friends, the Russians, for their enemy. It's unbelievable. Until today, I can't believe it, how they were able to obey orders to fight the Russians. And now I'm going to have to jump a few years just for the sake of the history. In 1943-44 winter, when Hitler is losing the war on the Russian front, all the surviving Jewish soldiers were massacred by the Germans and by the Hungarians, including the 3 high-ranking generals and including 4 of my uncles. They were massacred by the Germans and by the Hungarians because they didn't want to have Jewish witnesses to their defeat. Unbelievable story. But it's not written in the history books. When it comes to Jews, most of the important things are not written in the history books. So we survivors are here to tell you certain things that you don't know about it. This, of course, we found out after the war when we came home, and a handful of survivors, helped by some good Hungarian officer to escape, they came home and they told us this horror story. Just unbelievable. I have to go back to 1941, to my story, when December 7th, 1941, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, the United States entered the war, we were completely isolated from the free world. Until then, we didn't have too much news, because news was nothing more than Hungarian or German Nazi propaganda. The minute United States entered the war, we were completely isolated from the free world. We didn't know even what's happening in our neighborhood. Absolutely nothing. We were cut off from the free world. Not just the Jews, everyone. 1942 was the worst year in our lives because Hitler was winning in all the fronts. So we suffered. But it was an important year. It was an important year because BBC started the Free Europe radio. So we were glued to the radios every night for about 2.5 hours. We Jews, we had no radios. Our radios were confiscated. But we went to our Christian neighbors and we were listening Free Europe radio. BBC was transmitting every night for 2.5 hours, 5 different languages. And we were listening to even a language that we didn't understand well. Who spoke in my town French? But we were listening because it was something, a good feeling, Free Europe radio. And BBC told us about the atrocities what the Germans are committing in Poland and Russia. But never once, honestly, they mentioned that Jews are being mass murdered in Poland. And they knew it. And they knew it. The fantastic intelligence of the American army and the British, they knew it exactly that in 1942, over 2 million Jews were already murdered in the most brutal ways in the camps of Treblinka, Majdanek, and in Auschwitz, and they didn't tell us. And I consider it as a crime. The Allies, United States, the country that I love so much, they knew it from many different sources what's happening in those horrible camps. And they didn't tell us. Just unbelievable. the biggest crime that you can imagine. Because when you know information, you have to tell this to people. I mentioned that they knew it from many different sources. I cannot tell you all the sources because it would take me most of my time. But I mentioned you one that you can check it, especially you youngsters, on the internet. When you punch in the spy of Auschwitz, you'll see what I am talking about. The Allies, they planted a Polish officer who was born in or near Auschwitz, in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Now, how they did it? When the German army invaded Poland, and they ran it over no time, in 3 weeks, because the Polish army was no match to the huge German machinery, 30,000 or so Polish soldiers escaped to England through the sea. And they fought very bravely on the side of the Allies. So they picked this Polish officer who was born in or near Auschwitz, a great hero. This man who gave up his freedom to be in the worst place on the face of the earth, he agreed, and they planted him in an ammunition factory near Auschwitz-Birkenau. Very smart, because in the ammunition factory were thousands of Polish civilians that they know this great hero, this great man, and everybody wanted to help him. He was in contact with the Allies on a daily basis, and he told the Allies that 2 or 3 transports of 5,000 people are arriving daily to Birkenau. And 2/3 of them are exterminated in the same day. On daily basis, he informed the Allies. But Allies dismissed his claim. They said he's exaggerating. Then why did you plant this poor man in this most horrible place on the face of the earth? The Allies dismissed his claim. They said he's exaggerating. Sure, over 2 million Jews were already murdered, so he's exaggerating. And we Jews, we were abandoned by the free world. No one cared what's happening to the Jews. Not exactly, because civilians, private citizens, and government officials, they saved many Jews against the wishes of their governments, but they did. There are over 24,000 righteous Gentiles that their names are in the Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem, that they saved Jews. But as governments, no one wanted to do anything with Jews. No one cared, and we Jews, we were abandoned by the free world, and in my opinion, and some other young survivors, we were also abandoned by God, which was even much worse. 1943, 1944 winter, Hitler is losing the war. So we were happy. We thought that the war will be pretty soon over. Hitler found out that in 1944, President of Hungary, Admiral Miklos Horthy, is protecting the Jews. Now, Admiral Miklos Horthy, before the war, was sure that Hitler is going to win the war, and he wanted to be on the winning side. Now that Hitler is losing the war, he wants to be on the winning side again. So he's trying to protect the Jews. Even though he was an anti-Semite, I still salute him, because he was trying to save Jews. Of course, for his own benefit, but he was trying to save Jews. Except it was already too late. Admiral Miklos Horthy wasn't a strong leader anymore, so Hitler invited him to Berlin. While he was traveling to Berlin, by the way, for the youngsters especially. Until today, I don't know how come he was called Admiral Miklos Horthy. If you know the map, I am sure you can see that Hungary doesn't have no seaports and no navy, maybe some fishing boats. But he was a well-decorated Hungarian admiral. We couldn't care less, but this was the truth. Excuse me. So he was invited to Berlin. While he was traveling to Berlin, the German army marched into Hungary. Now, the German army really didn't have to occupy Hungary because they were allies. They came for one reason only, to take away, to deport, and to murder the remaining 750,000 Hungarian Jews. 750,000, it's a lot of Jews for a small country like Hungary. Also included about 140,000 from Slovakia. So they came in April 1944. We got orders to pack our belongings, and we are going to be transferred somewhere deep in Hungary into some labor camps. Now, we didn't have too much belongings anymore because we were almost 2 or 3 months already in ghettos. So we had very little. We packed our schmattes, our belongings, and we were marching towards the train station. In my hometown, we were only 2,200 Jews. It was a small town. For me, this was the biggest town I knew, only 24,000 inhabitants, and we were marching towards the train station. And in the train station, we had our first shock, because we saw cattle cars, boxcars for animals. So we asked my father, they going to transport us with boxcars? Father was a very practical man. He said, big deal. Hungary is a small country. How long are we going to travel with boxcars? A day, and we'll get to our destination. It's wartime, and maybe they don't have regular cars. By the way, Father was a very important person, not just to my family, everyone in my hometown. My father was a young, decorated soldier from the First World War. He was a leader, he was an organizer, and he was somewhat respected by the lousy Hungarians. I don't know why. So everything we asked my father. We got orders to board the train, 55 people per boxcars. I don't know if you saw boxcars of the Second World War in movies or in some museums. The boxcars of the Second World War were junky little wooden boxcars. For 55 people, not even enough place where to sit down. But we got orders to board the train. Our leaders, including my father, they told us to stay alive and to stay together, we have to obey the orders. Because those people, that they are wearing the uniforms of the Hungarian or to the German army, those are not soldiers. To be a soldier is honor. Those are either trained or born murderers. And to stay alive, we have to obey the orders. So we boarded the train, 55, sometimes 56 people. Not even enough place where to sit down. At night, the Hungarians came, they locked those heavy doors, and the train started to move. And when the train was moving, everybody was crying. We left our homes, our friends, especially our Christian friends, that we loved them so much, like brothers for so many years, and now we are traveling like animals in a dark box. The scariest thing that anybody can imagine. Nobody was able to sleep first night because you can't sleep. The noisy, squeaky wheels from the train, babies are crying, the elderly. It was something horrible. But we thought 1.5 day travel in Hungary, will make it. Next day, around noon, the train stopped somewhere middle of nowhere in Hungary. The Hungarians came, they opened those heavy doors, and they told us we should send 4 young men for some provision, for some food. Now, we had some food with us that we picked up in the ghetto, things that doesn't need refrigeration, but they gave us Hungarian army bread, green onions, it was May 1st, green onions, and water. And water was the most important thing because you don't have no running water in the boxcars. And when they opened those heavy doors, it was also the first time we noticed the SS murderers. And by now, we are almost 5 years into the war, nothing officially, but we heard horror stories about the SS murderers. And this was very scary. It was very scary. With the Hungarians, it would be 50-50. But to see the SS murderers on the train, it was the most scariest thing that you can imagine. And then when we picked up the food, they locked those heavy doors again, and we are traveling again another 4 days and 4 nights in the most horrible condition that anybody can imagine. The condition, the sanitation condition in the train after 4 days was so horrible, so inhuman that you can't imagine. The filth was unbearable. I cannot tell you everything, how bad it was, because if I would tell you, you would throw up and you would leave this place. And God forbid, I don't want to throw up and leave this place. The condition was unbearable. We wanted that the train should stop somewhere in a garbage dump, just to stop. The elderly, mostly the religious, they were praying to God all day and all night that the Allies should come and bomb the train and we should end our miserable lives right there. Well, we were young. We wanted to leave and we didn't pray to God he should come. He wouldn't come anyway. He was occupied with something else. That's the truth. He couldn't care less about the Jews. In my opinion, he went to Club Med. Or maybe in a different planet. That's the truth, and don't feel bad about it because that's the truth. He didn't came to Auschwitz. But where they are taking us for 4 days and 4 nights, there is no traveling in Europe for 4 days and 4 nights. Actually, 5 nights and 4 days. There is no such distance. It's not United States. If you board the train in Budapest, in 5 nights and 4 days, even the train is going to make 50 miles an hour, you end up in Asia. There is no distance in Europe to travel. The condition was so horrible that people wanted to commit suicide on the train. On the 5th day morning, I woke up early. Everybody woke up early. They slept 20 minutes or 25 minutes, one on each other. Daybreak, and I saw my father is standing one of the windows. As you know, each corner has an 8 by 16 openings. Daybreak, he was already standing there. He wanted to know where we are. Father was very well traveled in Europe, so he wanted to know where we are. But when he turned around, he looked to me like he was crying. My father changed drastically in the same minute when he turned around. I never saw him so miserable in my life. This proud, strong man. I can see his face. I still can see his face. He looked to me so miserable that I can't imagine, that I can't even explain. I have an excellent recording camera on the back of my head. We all have recording cameras, but mine is unique, I think. Maybe it was made by Sony, who knows. I see his face, and my mother asked him, what happened? And he told us in a strong, rather complaining voice, well, we are in Poland. When he told us that we are in Poland, the disappointment was so unbelievable because we thought that we are going in Hungary into a labor camp. And now we are in Poland. For us, Poland was a black hole. We heard horror stories about Poland. We heard from young survivors from all kind of massacres that they escaped Poland and they ended up in Hungary. And they ended up in Hungary. And they told us the horror stories that Jews are being pushed into the synagogues. Saturday, 800 or 900 people, and they were burned alive. But our leaders, our Jewish leaders told us not to believe those horror stories. It's not true. It cannot happen. There is no such thing that the Germans are burning people in synagogues. Our leaders told us. But now we are in Poland, in this black hole. The disappointment was so horrible. We were jumping always on the, especially on elderly, that they wanted to commit suicide. We wouldn't let them. And then the train did not stop anymore for lunch, as it stopped not lunch, for some food every day. It's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the train doesn't stop. And then maybe around 3 o'clock afternoon, the train was slowing down. And when the train was slowing down, I was between the youngsters. We rushed towards the window to see where we are. And we saw a huge sign, as they usually come on the train station. Says in Polish, said Auschwitz, Auschwitz in German. Again, we asked my father, where is Auschwitz? He says, I never heard the name. Small towns, maybe it's a tiny little town, not on the map. Small town in those days were not on the map. Like today, you press a button, you see your house. Small towns were not on the map. And no more than a minute and a half after, we passed by the sign Auschwitz. The train came to a halt, stopped. And when the train stopped, I remember so vividly like yesterday. Nobody was rushing towards the window to see where we are. It's like we had this horrible feeling that this is it. We just had this horrible feeling that this is the end. Because we heard from my father early this morning that this is Poland. And now we are in this horrible place. And then all of a sudden, probably somebody gave orders. All those heavy doors from the train opened at once. And what we saw in front of us from the platform of the train is the hardest thing even start to explain. But I found an easy way. We left the planet Earth. We left the planet Earth, and we are some a different place, a different planet that we never saw before and never heard before. It was a sunny day, either 5th or 6th of May, 1944. I lost a day somewhere. A sunny day. But when the train moved in to the camp, everything was gray. Everything was gray. The most horrible sight that you can imagine. From the platform, we saw hundreds and hundreds of barracks, grayish barracks, with their roofs, with very low roofs, with tiny windows below the roofs. And not too far, we saw 2 or 3 chimneys, factory chimneys. They were 5, but from our position, we saw only 2 or 3. And heavy smoke came from those chimneys towards the camp. And the ashes were settling all over on the roof and everywhere. But the smell was unbearable. The smell from these ashes were unbearable. Somebody was yelling, oh, those are rubber factories. Sure, rubber factories. Of course, who had experienced before how human flesh smells? So he decided rubber factories. And we accepted it. Horrible rubber factories. And then we saw maybe 100 or so some strange-looking people with their striped pajamas. I'm calling the striped ugly pajamas, with some round caps and with sticks in their hands. Those were capos, the trustees of the SS, that they did the dirty job for the SS. Those were Jews, Christians, gypsies, but mainly German criminals. And maybe 100 or 150 SS guards all over. And they were yelling, they were shouting, schnell raus, schnell raus, schnell raus, like crazy, like not normal people. Schnell raus, quick out. And those prisoners, they jumped into the boxcars and they ordered us. You go there, you go there, you go there. The confusion was they created in seconds. You can't believe it. Confusion for us. They know exactly what they want to do. And as I see, they send that there everywhere. From right there from the platform, we saw the most heartbreaking separation of the families. We saw sometimes that babies were torn from their young mother's arms, and the baby was stretching the little arm, and the mother still wanted to catch. That's it. The mother was pushed on the left-hand side. The baby was given to the grandmother, to the grandfather, and they went to the right-hand side. The most heartbreaking separation of the families right there. We became beautiful, loving families. We were separated from our loved ones in seconds, and we never saw our loved ones in life again. In seconds. A few years ago, I met Steven Spielberg. I was one small part in the Holocaust movie, and so I met him. But later on, I met him in a different occasion, and I told him, Steven, you made some excellent movies about the Holocaust. How come you never put on the screen the most heartbreaking separation of the families right there at the platform? Well, he says the most heartbreaking separation, stories from Auschwitz is the crematoriums and the gas chambers. I said, yes, Steve, it's true. But we don't have no survivors from the gas chambers and from the crematoriums. But we are survivors from the separation of the families. How come you didn't put it on a screen? So people should see, the good people, especially the American people, should see how those people treated us worse than animals in the first minute that we arrived. Well, he didn't know what to answer. And I forgive him because he's much smarter than I am. But I'm sure when he went home, he was thinking about it. And then it was a very long line for very sick people, for very old people, or for very young people. And then a shorter line for able-bodied men and able-bodied women, maybe up to 40, 45. And my mother was very young, just 39 years old. But I had a little brother, Gabi, not even 3 years old. And they were sent to this long line. And nobody told me yet nothing. And when I saw my mother and my little brother in this long line, I ran after them. By now I was 13 years old, like to protect them. I wanted to be with them because we didn't have a chance to hug them or kiss them. I ran after them. But my father ran after me grabbed my arm. He says, no, you're coming with the men. But I says, Dad, I want to go with my little brother and my mother to protect them. I want to know where they are going. No, you are coming with the men. You are a bar mitzvah boy. Most of you know a Jewish boy when he's 13 has a party like communion, bar mitzvah. You are a man. You are a man now. You are coming with the men. A man of this size. And my mother and my little brother were already far, walking far, towards a huge factory-like building, rubber factory, like I said, sure. And they were walking up on a small hill. And because we didn't have even chance to hug them or to kiss them, they were looking for us. They were looking for us. And they spotted us. And we spotted them. And they waved to us. And we waved them back. And this was the last time that I saw my mother, just 39 years old. And can you have a napkin, please? A napkin. Thank you. And my brother, Gabi, not even 3 years old. And they disappeared behind this huge factory-like building. And we asked those animals that they jumped into the boxcars, prisoners or whatever. And we asked them where those people are going. They are going to the children's camp, they told us. Sure. They went to the gas chambers, but we didn't know it. And today is easy to say it. Thanks God that we did not know it. Because if we would have known, they would have to slaughter us, all of us right there. Because which normal human being would let his mother, his brother, his sister, or anybody from his family to relatives to be pushed into a gas chamber? So thanks God that we didn't know it. At least some of us are alive. And then I was standing with my father and my brother Andrew, 16 and a half exactly. And we were in a long line. And in the beginning, the line, there were some SS men were still selecting from the people that the couple selected if somebody wasn't too healthy or too strong for work. So they decided. And as we were standing in this long line, we were probably 400, 450, I don't know. As we were standing in the long line, all of a sudden I see my father is running into the boxcars because the boxcars were very closed. And in a few minutes he's coming back with a pair of boots, winter boots for my mother. And he says, put it on. I said, by far, Dad, those are my mother's winter boots. Put it on, he said. And I took off my shoes, and he took my shoes, and he threw it away onto the train, and I put on my mother winter boots. Still did not realize, why do I have to have the winter boots? It's summer, almost. The winter boots, they had maybe 2.5 inch heel. So instantly I became almost the height of my brother who was 16 and a half. But I didn't know it. I didn't know it. Maybe someone in the line from the couples, those trustees, someone told my father, this young man is not going to make it, he's too short. And my father reacted very quickly. But I didn't know. I never asked him. I just know that I had my mother boots. And then we were walking and we were approaching a tall German. And this tall German signaled towards my father that it's okay, I'm going with him. Against all odds. All my friends from schoolmates, all of them, they went to the right-hand side. I was the only shrimp with my father's group. The 2.5 inch or maybe 2 inch heels. Except when we approached him, this German asked my father, how old is the young man? And my father lied to him. He was able to lie. We didn't have no papers with us. He told him 15 or 14 and a half in German. I didn't know exactly what he said. I couldn't care less what he's talking to me. And we passed by him. Later on, I found out that this tall German was the infamous, they called him Doctor, Butcher Mengele, that I met him first time in my life. And then we were walking in this huge camp. If you don't mind, I'm going to sit down. We're walking in this huge camp, and then all of a sudden, hundreds and hundreds of prisoners are rushing towards the barbed wire fence. We were walking between the barbed wire fence. But when they approached the barbed wire fence, they looked so awful, it was impossible to look at them. Young people looked like 150-year-old people. It was impossible to look at them. Those were our brothers, but they were starving there. And they begged us we should throw them some food over the fence. But we didn't have anything. If we would know that there are hungry people are waiting, we would stuff our pockets. We left everything in the boxcars. We didn't know. But we were so happy to pass them by, not to see them, because it was the scariest thing to see those horrible faces. They looked like dead people are walking. They looked like they pushed the dirt aside and they walked up from their graves. It's okay. Thank you. We were so happy to pass them by, not to see them. And then we were walking a short distance, and we came to a small brick building. There is some glitch into the microphone. Maybe you put on the, here will be stronger. Okay. All right, thank you. We came to a smaller building, a brick building, and they told us to undress. We're going to take showers. Where shower was welcomed. We were so filthy. We were so filthy after 5 days traveling. It was something so horrible. No wonder they called us filthy Jews. And when we undressed, there were a lot of young people with all kinds of tools, cutting and shaving the hair all over on our body. And we took a quick shower. Just a quick shower for a few seconds. And we walked up from the shower wet, because they didn't give us anything to wipe off the water, of course. And they sprayed us with some kind of smelly powder like DDT in those days, I don't know. And then they gave us this prison clothing, which was so hard to put on. It was so rough. It was so rough. It was something like made from wood, some synthetic. But it was okay to put on anything, because you're so lost when you are naked between so many people. So anything to put on. But the shoes was a disaster. The shoes were, the sole was about an inch thick wood, and the upper was canvas. You cannot walk in it. So we walked out from the showers, and we were sitting waiting. It was already night, and they took us to our barracks. I was separated from my father and brother, but in the same camp. Actually, very close by. Father and brother were in Barrack 19, and I was in Barrack 21 between the youngsters in the Zigeuner lager. They called it the gypsy camp. Why was it called gypsy camps? Because it was 18 or 20,000 German gypsy families still living in the camp. Hitler still didn't decide what to do with them. But then, of course, after a couple months, in August 2nd, 1944, all the gypsies were rounded up, and they were taken to the crematoriums. But this, of course, we found out only later on, and this was the end of the German gypsy history, no one survived. No one gypsy survived. Maybe some gypsies survived in Germany, hiding or something, but let me tell you something. The German gypsies looked like me, or my family, or anybody of you. Absolutely no difference. But somewhere, the scientists, they found maybe a drop of blood, or who knows what. In those days, there were no DNA, and they found that they have gypsy blood, so they were sent to the camps. And this was the end of the German gypsy history. We went to sleep first night in this horrible, horrible place. I don't know even how to call it right, because it wasn't a prison. It was more like a leprous camp, or 10 times worse. We went to sleep first night without any food or anything to drink, on the bare concrete floor. And this part of Poland, early May, is still very cold. On the bare concrete floor. The next day we found out there are bunk beds in Auschwitz, but for youngsters, concrete was also good. And we fall asleep. And then, 6 o'clock in the morning, the capos came and they kicked us out from the barracks. And we were waiting for about 2 hours, and they served us breakfast. Sure. About a quart of filthy water. I swear that the water from the faucet came out clean. But they put in something so it looked filthy, should look filthy. Because they were yelling all day, those SS murderers, our great heroes in the Russian front were drinking filthy water and water from the snow and from the rain. So this is good for you. So with this, we knew that the water was clean. In Auschwitz, they just put in something that we should drink filthy. We should get used to it. And then they told us there will be a soup around noon. I just wanted to see what we went through in the first days, so you have a picture what those animals were able to do to us. And then after so many roll calls, kickings and beatings by the capos, and name-calling by the SS. They called us the filthiest names. I won't mention not even one, because I don't even know from where they picked up those filthy German names. And we didn't know why. Why the constant roll calls and kickings and beatings. But our friends, that they were starving there, they told us why. That we should get used to it, that we are not humans. We are hated animals. And they did a good job about it. Because constant hunger drives you insane. And the top of this treatment, you turn to a little animal in no time. Not all of us, but most of us. Turn to a little animal, no time. And then after so many roll calls, came this long-awaited soup around noon. Now again, the soup was cooked garbage. It smelled garbage, it looked garbage, and it tasted like garbage. We wanted to eat because we were hungry. We were not starving yet, but we were hungry. If we saw those other prisoners, they swallowed it and they were happy. We were unable. We had to spit it out. You cannot turn to an animal in 24 hours because the food was, I wouldn't give it to the pigs. It was filth, it was garbage, cooked garbage. You cannot eat garbage in 24 hours. It takes a very long time till you are so hungry that you would eat even the containers that it was served. So we gave the soup to our friends. So they were happy. And then, after so many roll calls and kickings, at night came the most important part, the bread. Unlike the soup, the bread wasn't garbage, not far from it, but it was edible. Very untasty, very unusual, but edible. Very unusual loaf, very heavy, soggy. I don't know exactly what it was made from because I never saw bread like this. It looked like all kind of grains crushed together. But one thing I know for sure, and you probably won't believe it, if it was 15 or 20% of the bread, sawdust. Sawdust. The German scientists, they knew exactly how to use sawdust as a filler to make it more, and they created a wonder bread for Jews, which was edible. Or not just Jews, because there were about 120,000 Polish Christians and other nationalities in Auschwitz-Birkenau also. So the bread was for them just the same. Very untasty, but edible. And many times we found small pieces of wood, like built-in toothpicks in the bread. But you felt the sawdust on the crust of the bread. It was edible. What happened either from the bread or from the soup, we got diarrhea. And diarrhea in the camps is death sentence. Because if you cannot get rid of the diarrhea very fast, by pure luck, might as well you eat the dirt from the floor. Maybe this is going to help, because there is nothing available to cure. You were taken to the infirmary. Except the infirmary wasn't called infirmary either, because the Germans didn't call anything normal when it came to the Jews. The infirmary was called the Riviera. Now, can you believe it? A Riviera in Auschwitz? What kind of Riviera? French, Mexican, Spanish Riviera? And people went to Riviera, they never came back. Of course not, because there was nothing to cure them. People, they went to the infirmary, they probably ended up in the crematoriums. But I don't know. I was 2.5 months in Auschwitz. I never heard crematoriums or gas chambers. Even if I would hear, I wouldn't know what it means. I was young, not too sophisticated boy from Slovakia who heard crematoriums or gas chambers. The older survivors are telling me that they knew that the chimneys, those were crematoriums. I don't know. I was 2.5 months in Auschwitz. I never heard crematoriums or gas chambers. It was everything secretly done. The Sonderkommando, which was called, the people they were working in the crematoriums, they were murdered every 3 or 4 months and replaced by other prisoners. So we didn't know really what's happening. So this horrible, horrible, impossible life went on for about 1.5 months. And I call it life because it was sticking inside. When my father and my brother came to say goodbye to me, which was very heartbreaking, because it was a good feeling to know that father is just a few steps from me, sleeping with my brother. But for some reason, from unselfish reasons, I was happy that they are going to somewhere else. Maybe something better is waiting for them. Father came and told me with my brother that they are going to be transferred into a labor camp in Germany, Dachau. So I was happy. Labor camp probably will be something different. And we sat down with my father for about 20 minutes, and my father gave me some very strict, actually gave me orders. At home, this would be advice. But because it was in the camps, it was orders from a sergeant to his young son. And because of my father's orders, and probably that much of a luck, I am here today. Only because of my father's orders. He told me many things. I cannot tell you everything because we wouldn't have time, and you probably are not interested. But I'll just give you one example. He told me, Miki, I want you to, every morning before the roll call, at home I was called Miki, My family called me Miki. My friends are calling me Miki. My family here calls me Miki. But my name is Michael. So you're welcome to call me Miki also. He told me, Miki, you're going to wash your face every day with the water that you are getting drink. Half of the water you're going to drink in the morning, and with the other half, I want you to rub your cheeks for very long. You should look like a good little soldier. And with a little bit water, clean your clothes. I want you to look like a soldier. Promise me. And I promised him. And then he told me something very important. God forbid if you got diarrhea. Don't tell to no one. Just go to one of the boys. They're going to pick up the food from the kitchen and tell them that at night you're going to give them a chunk from your bread. They should steal for you, because I told you there is nothing available. They should steal for you from the kitchen oven a chunk of burnt wood, charcoal, and chew this charcoal. And this charcoal going to relieve your stomach problem. An excellent advice. An excellent. Why? Because they were together with doctors, Polish, Hungarian, French. But we youngsters, we had no doctors between us. And those doctors, they knew the tricks how to survive. And then he told me, you're going to leave this place. Now, how am I going to do it? You're going to volunteer. Volunteer for anything that comes up, no questions, and no advice from no one. If you see any possibility to leave this place, volunteer. Promise me no advice from no one. Just volunteer. For my father was probably very important that his young son should leave this place, because he knew probably much more about Auschwitz than I did. I was occupied all day with hunger. I was thinking about food. Father was a family man, and he was thinking about his family. So for him, he knew that this horrible place, I don't stand too much chances to survive in this place. Because I also didn't have anymore my mother's shoes. Then I knew it already. Then I already knew. But I had already the shoes, the wooden shoes, of course. And then we hugged each other, and we kissed each other, and his last word was, remember, Hitler is losing the war, and we'll see you soon at home. And again, this was the last time that I saw my father, just 43 years old, and my brother Andrew, 16 and a half. They were massacred. They were massacred in a, They were massacred in a labor camp, in a sub-camp of Dachau, a week before the liberation. They were working the hardest labor that you can imagine. Those skinny, hungry people, they were building something subterranean, 10 to 12 hours a day, pouring concrete. The hardest work that you can imagine, underground. And a week before the liberation, 1,500 young men, when they finished their work, they were walking towards the camp. They had to walk through a small forest. The German army now, the regular German army, the Wehrmacht, were waiting for them. They were massacred and buried in shallow graves. And just a week later, when the Patton's army arrived there, the Third Army, they were told by the survivors, so 1,500 innocent people were massacred in this horrible place. So the American army forced the German civilians from the neighboring towns to dig up those bodies, and they built a Jewish cemetery next to the Christian cemetery, and they put up a tombstone. 1,500 innocent people were buried, were massacred just a week ago before the liberation. So I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed that my father and my brother are buried in a grave with a marker, a mass grave, and with a marker. So I can go to visit with my wife, with my children, with my grandchildren. Such a treasure. Because there are thousands and thousands of graves all over in Germany and Poland, but there are no markers. Nobody even knows who's under those number, 2,000, 3,000, that's all. Nobody knows. And then, of course, the millions that they died in the crematoriums, their ashes were thrown all over in the fields of Poland as fertilizers. Fertilizers, yes. Jewish ashes. So I'm so blessed that I have this treasure. I went to visit so many times. I have a picture, and then when I went second time, I went into the main camp, and I got a list from all the 1,500 people that they are buried there. This, of course, I found out after the war when I came home, and I didn't find my father and brother. I was investigating. I went all over in Slovakia to look what happened to my father and brother, and they told me, go to this town, go to that town. After about 2 months, I found a father with his son, and they told me, yes, we knew your father even before the war, so you go back and you're going to find their grave. So I'm so blessed. And then, of course, the life in Auschwitz went on for another month when Mengele came to select some children. And by now, this was very dangerous, because now we are already 2.5 months in Auschwitz, and we knew that when Mengele comes to select, thank you so much, select some children, this is very dangerous, because he selected a lot of youngsters for all kind of experiments, and they never came back. So he came with a few SS guards, and we were in roll call, maybe 500 or so youngsters, and he asked who has some experience in metalwork, and I was standing in the front row because I was short. I still am. And he started to select few youngsters. And he selected few, maybe 3 or 4, older and taller than I was, but he was approaching. He was approaching me, and I was looking at him. I was looking at him, but he was leaving. He was leaving. And I was following him because he was walking sideways, still staring at me as he was walking. Very unusual. And he all of a sudden stopped. Again, very unusual. Mengele doesn't have to stop. He is God in Auschwitz. And I probably don't have no magical powers to stop him. But he stepped back the few steps, and he slapped me like this, and he told me, "Hawap mensch," translated like jump man. Except Hawap, the Germans are telling to their dogs, Hawap. But it was okay with me. And he selected 14 youngsters, and they put us on a small truck, and we were approaching the main gate of Auschwitz. And of course, my friends, they were crying that I met them in the camps, that I left them. But I told them I had orders from my father, and I had to raise my hand. And we were directed into a small barrack, and SS was sitting at a desk, and they tattooed the numbers on our arms. And he was finishing the tattoo. He was reading it back to me, B6193, like this is my name now. I was probably the happiest young boy in Auschwitz. This stupid number meant to me so much that you can't believe it. Not because I know what is in store for me, just because I did something that my father ordered to me to do. This was the only thing. I didn't know anything else. And then they put us on another truck, and we are leaving this horrible place called Auschwitz-Birkenau. It was the best dream that anybody can imagine, to see this horrible place disappear. We know that we are going to another camp, but at least this place disappears, because the hope is there that you go to maybe to a different, a better place. This is what keeps you alive, the hope. And we were traveling for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and we ended up in a small labor camp, middle of nowhere. but it was a walking distance from a huge factory. And the labor in the factory was a blessing. I was a runner, like in the factory, exchanging worn out and broken tools to the professionals. And the second day when I came to my foreman, and we had the civilians were good to us, but they couldn't help us in anything, and we had no right even to talk to them. The only talk was in German to ask what kind of tool he needs, and he had to tell me what he needs in German. But when I came to this Polish foreman, he was looking around. If no SS or Gestapo present, he told me I should approach, which was very unusual and very scary. But I did approach him. He bent down his head, and he told me in Polish, tell your friends that the Russian army is very close by, and you will be liberated very soon. It was such a good feeling to hear this great man to tell me such an important thing. It was so dangerous for him and for me, but he took the chance. Just unbelievable. And when the next day I came, he told me I should empty the garbage can. But he blinked with his eyes. And the blink, I was smart enough to know that the blink means something. And sure enough, I took out the garbage can and was emptying it carefully. And sure enough, I found maybe 1 or 2 bites of real Polish bread. No sawdust. Can you believe it? He took the chance, this great man, to throw away a piece of bread for me. He couldn't throw away half a sandwich because he would have been shot. During the war, you cannot throw away half a sandwich. But this 1 or 2 bites of real Polish bread was waiting for me for 5.5 months every day. Even if he didn't have what to throw into the garbage can, he covered it with something, and these 1 or 2 bites probably saved my life. And I was unable to thank him. This man who did for me such a thing, I was unable to thank him because you cannot thank. There is no such thing. Why you are thanking him? Eyes and ears are everywhere. It's so dangerous for both of us. But he probably knows in the sky, in the heaven. The life in the labor camp was a little bit better because we even had soap to take showers. We were able to take showers every day. I was 2.5 months, summer months in Auschwitz, 1 cold shower. Here I'm able to take cold shower every day. In winter we cannot take showers because you would be frozen. Even with a bar of soap. The bar of soap is a very tragic story. Maybe towards the end, Q&A, if somebody wants to know, I'll tell you, but I want to continue because not too much time left. So we were in this labor camp 5.5 months. It was already January 21st, 1945, when the Russians were shelling the factory that we were working in, so we thought we will be free. But the Germans didn't give up. They told us to evacuate. Evacuate where? The snow is up to here, especially for me. We had nothing but the pajamas. Freezing cold weather. The coldest winter ever recorded in the European history was the 1944-45 winter. The SS were bundled up with all kinds of warm clothing, and they were shivering. And we had to walk in this freezing weather in the heavy snow with our wooden slippery shoes, with just like on a beach in the pajamas. Everybody had frostbitten one or both foot. People that had frostbitten both foot, they were unable to walk because frostbite hurts terrible. I was lucky, I had frostbitten only one foot, the left one. It was very painful. People that had frostbitten both foot, they had to sit down and warm up their foot, and of course, bullet in the head. There is no such thing, no time for it, and they were buried in the heavy snow. After all day walking in this unbelievable freezing weather, we ended up in a small town, Sosnovitz. I don't know how many of us died, because we were 1,400 when we left about the camp. I have no idea how many was alive, because we were frozen. Our brains were not functioning. We were packed to the boxcars, maybe 75 or 80 people, and they gave us 2 pieces of bread, and they told us it has to be for 3-day travel. Now, who cares, 3 days or 30 days? When we had the luxury to have 2 pieces of bread, so we finished the bread at the same night, and we had nothing left for the 3-day travel. But every day when the train stopped to do our personal needs, we were eating snow. Snow is good. Snow is water. We ended up, after 3 days, in a place called Mauthausen in Austria. Probably the ugliest, the most horrible concentration camps on the face of the earth. A human garbage dump, probably even worse. This camp was built for about 18 or 19,000 people. When we arrived, there were 70,000 people cramped into this horrible place. Not just Jews. Majority were POWs, and mainly Russian POWs. And the fate of the Russian POWs was exactly like ours, and sometimes even worse. Sometimes much worse. I cannot go into it because of the time, but I am sorry that I cannot honor those great Russian soldiers the way they were murdered. Because of the time limit, I'm going to have to end with my own personal tragedy. Tragedy, top of the tragedy. We were in the camp already a month when we were youngsters, about 120 youngsters, in a part of the barrack. We behaved bad. At night, when they told us to go to sleep, we behaved bad. Nobody wanted to sleep next to the wall because the bed was very cold and very, very wet of the high snow. So we were pushing and shoving each other. And because the capos couldn't put us in order, they called the SS to help. And the SS were very eager to come and to help and to punish us. Between the SS guard was one of the biggest, most infamous murderer of the Third Reich, was called the Sturmführer Kaduk, Sergeant Kaduk, the beast, the sadist animal of Mauthausen. The way he was murdering people, the way he enjoyed to murder people, until today I can't believe that he was created by God. The way he enjoyed to murder people, not just Jews. So he came and he kicked us out for 1 hour to stand on the snow with both foot, which is impossible. With the wooden slippery shoes, you cannot stand on the ground more than 20 minutes. If you don't raise your foot, you get slowly, go to the ground, you fall asleep, you got frozen, and you fall over and you died. We who didn't want to die, we were cheating, raising one foot, raising the other foot. But then the SS guards came and they were kicking us. And probably I don't have to tell you how much it hurts when they kick you in this freezing weather. But we who want to survive, we prefer the kick than to froze to death. So it went on for an hour, and after 1 hour, again, I don't know how many else died. Probably more than half of us died outside. They called us into the barrack, and they gave us some exercise to warm up. Well, we didn't have too much energy to exercise. I was between the healthy ones because of the 2 bites of bread that I mentioned it to you. This what kept me still strong. So after the exercise, they gave us orders to stand up. Again, I was strong enough to stand up. But my good friend, Robert, who was my brother, a good friend in the camps, in those conditions, is your brother. He almost died on me outside. And I loved him like a brother, because this is the only one that you have in the camps. And I grabbed his hand, and I told him, Robert, don't die on me. Don't die on me. And it helped. This helps. This helps even with wounded soldiers if you're begging them to stay alive. And I'm telling you with experience. And he came into the barrack, but when he was told to stand up, he had no energy to stand up. So I was approaching him in the back to help him to grab my pants to stand up. But this is unacceptable with the SS. We are not humans. We cannot help a friend. There is no such thing. You remember, we are animals. We cannot help a friend. So Sturmführer Kaduk, this Sergeant Kaduk, this beast, he saw that I'm helping a friend stand up. He came and he kicked me in the back. He kicked me in such a tremendous force. I was small and skinny. I flew into the wall. I collapsed and I thought I'm going to die. And I didn't want to. I was struggling. I didn't want to die, but I couldn't catch my breath. Not so much from the pain, but I was unable to catch my breath because I was swallowing blood. And blood came through my mouth and through my nose, and I was out. And like I died. But when the SS left, my good friends came, and they poured a lot of water into my throat, and I was coughing, and slowly I opened my eyes, and I saw their miserable faces. They were smiling at me, sometimes laughing. I was so happy to see their faces. Those young men brought me back. They brought me back. But I was very hurt. I was unable to sleep. I was very swollen. I used to sit down and fall on my friends like this. I had pain for a very long time, and then the pain dissipated. I used to have attacks, very bad attacks, and I didn't know what is it. 3.5 years later already, I was on the Israeli army, and I had an attack. And they took me to Jerusalem in a hospital to investigate because I was fighting in the mountains of Jerusalem. So they took me to Jerusalem. And the doctor was investigating what happened to me 3.5 years before. And I didn't have to tell him too much because he saw on the x-ray. And he said, well, young man, you are a miracle. For me, you are a miracle because when this beast kicked you, you lost your right kidney. But how come you didn't know about it? So if you did it so far, you will be here for many years to tell about your horror story. So after so many years, I am here to tell about my horror story in fairly good health. But our beast, Sergeant Kaduk, he isn't here. Because 2 days after the liberation, I was lucky enough to meet him at an airport. Well, I wasn't flying, but he was trying to fly. I was on the airport with my friends to steal food from the American cargo planes. We were stealing food from the American army, from the cargo planes, from the German homes, We came home in the bombed-up house in Germany, and the food was piling up like in Costco, and we were sitting in front of the food day and night and watching the food that we didn't need it, because the Americans gave us a lot of food. but we had to steal food. We wanted to be sure that we will never ever hungry in our lives. So this day we were at the airport when we were stealing boxes that we didn't even know what is in it, but we had to steal. And we heard some commotion, and we ran over. And the Polish children recognized Sergeant Kaduk in civilian clothing. He was trying to sneak into a cargo plane and to fly into England or to United States. Many of them did. Even today, they are still here, a few. And they got Social Security from the American government because they lied to the government that they are not SS. But this one was interrupted to fly by the Polish children, and they were beating him. And when I came there, I saw this big man kicking and beating him, so I was kicking him and beating him also, because I was still in pain. It was only 2.5 months before that he kicked me, so I was entitled to kick him, of course, even into his head. But then an American soldier ran over, and he was shooting in air that we should disperse. So the Polish kids disappeared, but I stayed behind. I wanted to know what's going to happen to this beast. And I couldn't speak no one word English, maybe 2 or 3. And I was yelling, Sturmführer, SS Sturmführer Kaduk. And he was trying to sit up. I wouldn't let him. I kicked him. Sure, it was a big shot. The American soldier was on my side. And I was telling the American soldier, SS Kaduk, SS Sergeant Kaduk. In the last minute, occurred to me, and I showed the American soldier. I told him, Tatu, SS here. Tatu and SS here in German and English is the same thing. Most of the Allied soldiers, they knew that the SS murderers, they have SS marking under the armpits. This soldier of mine, that I couldn't talk to him, he didn't know about it. But because he saw that I'm insisting something that he never heard before, he took off his jacket and his shirt, and sure enough, we discovered the SS markings. For me, it was also first time, because I didn't see in the camp the SS were not going off and showing their SS markings. So he turned around his short rifle and he put a bullet in his head. I was so grateful. I was so grateful to this great American soldier. So grateful to send this miserable beast who killed so many innocent people, to send to him to hell. Probably much farther than hell, because hell is for much better people than he was. He went much farther to hell. I was so grateful to him. I was able to tell him in English, thank you, but I was so confused. I grabbed him and I told him in German, Dankeschön, but he accepted it. And then I walked away, and next day I was picked up by American medics, because they were special units. They picked up sick people from the streets. I was picked up. I lost my 2 good friends. I was taken to the hospital, and I had a very bad case of typhus. And typhus is very high fever. I went 40 days between life and death, but one day I woke up, and the high fever is gone. So next day I already made plans to run away from the hospital, because I knew they won't let me go. I was very weak and sick. The second day, I walked up from the hospital, half naked, just in the smock from the hospital, but I had a bag of chocolate, because the Americans gave every day chocolate. And in typhus, you don't eat chocolate. So I walked up from the hospital barefoot. I went into a German house, and this German woman gave me a pair of pants, shoes, and boots. Everything was big on me, but she cut it to size. And she told me I should go to the train station. There is an American Army office. I'm going to get a certificate, and I'll be able to go wherever I want. I came to the American office. The American soldier filled out this certificate, and they told me to sign it. I was unable. I was very weak. My hand was shaking. But he was holding my hand, and he was crying. And he was... But he gave me the certificate. I boarded the train. Normally it would take me 5 hours to come from Austria to Czechoslovakia, but took me 6 very long days. On the 3rd day, I thought I'm not gonna make it because I was very sick and very weak. So I said, maybe God punished me, somebody punished me because I didn't say thanks to the great doctors and the staff, thank you that they saved my life. Until today, I cannot forgive myself, but I didn't tell them anything because I, of course, walked out from the hospital. I wanted to go home. I had my priority. But I was so sick on the train, I thought I'm not gonna make it. But I did, after 6 days, arrived to my hometown, very weak and very skinny, very, very sick. Neighbors came by. They didn't recognize me. But they saw that I'm a concentration camp survivor. It was written on me all over. They told me I should go to this street. They are the survivors living there. From the main street, I was able to see our small house, but I was scared to go there for many reasons. I ended up in the building, which was called the Jewish building, where I met 80 or 81 survivors from 2,200, and slowly realized I have no parents, and I have no brothers, and I have no close relatives. And from 39 people that we went into the camps, I was the only survivor, an age of 14. An orphan, and a very difficult life ahead of me. And this is my short story. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you. I have to mention just one thing. After this story, my wife is here, one of my daughters, and one of my granddaughters are listening to my story. But an unbelievable thing. Thank you. Thank you, God. If we have a few minutes, maybe for some questions. Yes.
Do we have a microphone, maybe a minute or two? Or maybe one, I think we have enough time for maybe a question.
What was it like after all of it was over? Like, what happened to all of the other, orphans who were left without parents or family or anything?
I am Mike, and this is Mike, and I have a problem with it. I couldn't understand the question.
Was asked what happened to all the other orphans after the war was over who didn't have families.
I can't hear the question. Maybe you heard the question. What happened to
all the other orphans that were just like you? All the other survivors that didn't have parents. What happened to them?
Oh, what happened to them? What happened to the other survivors? They were with me? Yes? Well, most of them, when I was together, they died from sickness. But one survived, if I have the time to tell. I was already married, and my wife was pregnant with my first daughter, and we were walking in a small city in Israel, Saturday afternoon, like here are cruising with cars. We had no cars to cruise, so we were walking. All of a sudden, a big convertible was passing by, and a young boy jumped from the car, ran towards me, and we hugged each other, and we were crying for about a half an hour, and my wife was standing there. She didn't know what's happening. Well, this was Robert, the one who I lost my kidney because of him, but I would do the same again. He emigrated to United States, and he heard that I live in Israel because we lost contact. I couldn't find him in Czechoslovakia, but he found out in United States that he lived in Israel, and one vacation he came to Israel, and he was told that I live in a small town of Lod, so he was walking with his family in the car, and he recognized me in the crowd, and this was Robert. Unbelievable story. Unbelievable story, but he passed away last year in Israel because after some 50 years, he went back to Israel again, and he passed away age of 85 in Israel, and he should rest in peace. And the rest of them, I never met again. They all went to different places, and hopefully they are still in good health somewhere, but we were unable to locate each other because after war, everybody went to different places. If they would have stayed in Czechoslovakia, we would meet. But because everybody went to different places, so we lost each other. Thank you. Anybody else? What?
I think that's all the time we had. We had time for a single
if it's
question.
all the time,
If I could
thanks
just,
again.
please join me one final time. We want to thank you for the gift of your story.